Hey everyone. Thanks so much for coming out on this rainy evening. I'm glad it got a little cooler. My name is Saskia Benjamin. I'm the executive director of Art Papers. I'm also an Emory grad, and we don't need to name the year. I'll just say it was in the 1900s. I'll leave it at that. I'm seeing some familiar faces and some not so familiar faces, and so some of you may not know who Art Papers is and what we do, so if you'll indulge me for a second. Art Papers is a nonprofit organization. We serve the creative community and the culturally curious by publishing and presenting diverse voices and critical perspectives on the cultural moments and urgent conversations happening in and beyond the art world. And we do this in print through Art Papers magazine, online via artpapers.org, and through public programming such as Art Papers Live. Art Papers Live is our longest running public program. And over the years, we've hosted such art world luminaries as Carol Walker, Adam Gopnik, Robert Irwin, Liam Gillick, Saskia Sassen, Trevor Paglin, Sanford Biggers, Derek Adams, Micheline Thomas, and Amy Sherald, among many, many others. And we are pleased to have Stephanie Dinkins join this illustrious list of thought leaders and cultural producers. Obviously, this is not something we can do alone. And I'd like to thank our partners and funders that made this evening possible. So thank you to the Michael C. Carlos Museum for hosting us tonight, and to Katie Erickson for helping coordinate the event. Thank you to Dana Howgard and the Emory Visual Arts for their support and partnership. Thank you so much to the National Endowment for the Arts and the City of Atlanta's Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs. You might be asking yourself at this point, how do I support Art Papers? And if you're not already a subscriber, I would urge you to go to artpapers.org, or we have a QR code on a postcard in the back of the room, and please sign up to become a subscriber. That goes directly to supporting the production of our print publication. And if you're already a subscriber, perhaps you might consider becoming a donor. It can also be done at artpapers.org. One little bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to the program. We will be sending you a post-event survey tomorrow. Really appreciate if you would take a second to fill it out. It helps us, and our funders are really interested in that data that we collect. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know how this went, how you found things. Without further ado, let me introduce Sarah Higgins, editor and artistic director of Art Papers, who will introduce Stephanie and what you'll be enjoying this evening. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. So as Saskia said, I'm Sarah Higgins. I'm the editor and artistic director at Art Papers, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce this evening's Art Papers Live speaker, Stephanie Dinkins. When co-editor Mashinka Ferontsekopian and I set out to make an issue of Art Papers about artificial intelligence, we knew that we wanted to focus not on the technology as such, but instead we wanted to explore the work of artists whose works address distinctly human questions about selfhood and representation, about ancestral knowledge and heritage algorithms, about the conceptual underpinning of a human versus non-human binary. The first artist that Mashinka and I both put forward, and who we enthusiastically agreed really must be a part of the issue, was Stephanie Dinkins. Stephanie is a transmedia artist who creates projects that foster dialogue about race, gender, aging, and our future histories. Her art practice centers emerging technologies, documentary practices, and social collaboration toward more equitable social and technological systems. Dinkins holds the Kusama Endowed Professorship in Art at Stony Brook University, where she founded the Future Histories Studio. She exhibits internationally at a broad spectrum of community, private, and institutional venues. She's a United States Artist Fellow, a Knight Arts and Tech Fellow, and a Creative Capital grantee. Hey. Her art practice has been generously supported by the Bergwijn Institute, Onassis Foundation, Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, the Soros Equality Fellowship, iBeam, Pioneer Works, Tech Lab, New Inc., Nokia Bell Labs, Blue Mountain Center, the Laundromat Project, Santa Fe Art Institute, and Art Omi. Her most recent exhibitions include Stephanie Dinkins on Love and Data at the Queens Museum of Art, but there have been many more, with many more to come, I'm sure. For the AI-themed issue, and where this talk will kind of branch out from this evening, Stephanie contributed an artist project that is an extension of her ongoing work, Not the Only One, or Into, the multi-generational memoir of a Black American family told from the perspective of an artificial intelligence of evolving intellect. That project exists throughout the issue as it appears, disappears, reemerges, and interrupts other elements and texts in the issue. She also recently spoke with Art Paper's contributing editor, Joey Orr, about her practice, family, and thinking about data as a social apparatus. That interview, entitled Building Something Now, and a version of Stephanie's artist project are both up on artpapers.org. So you can check them out there, or pick up a copy of the AI issue on your way out. They're back there on the table. That's what I absolutely recommend. It's better in print and was conceived for print. So today, Stephanie Dinkins will present a talk titled On Love and Data. Reading from the talk's description, this presentation develops a dialogue with hierarchies embedded within machine learning and AI architecture, and with one's individual agency in transforming the algorithms within it. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Saskia. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk to you, and I'm gonna hope that I'm gonna be able to talk to you without like losing my breath every once in a while. But if I do, don't worry, we'll get it done. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I think I do. It's always interesting to me to hear introductions about myself, because I'm like, oh no, I'm just this person who's playing in this playground of AI, who's really a photographer, who's really just a human, right? So it always baffles me to kind of hear all that and square it with who I think I am to what the world has told me I am at this point, right? So it's an interesting juxtaposition, but I'm going to share a little bit of my practice with you all, and maybe get to some questions around what and why and where I am right now, because my work is an interesting kind of thing in terms of when it was imagined, right? What technology it is imagined out of and how it functions. And Not the Only One is a really good example of this, right? So Not the Only One is this, like, I thought I was going to be making this voice interactive artificial intelligence that tells the story of a Black American family, a kind of memoir, right? Like something you could walk up to and ask a question about a family in America, and it would give an answer from my family's point of view. In the development and over time, it's become anything but that, truly. It's its own kind of thing. It's important to know that I started working on this thing in 2018, right? I think like conceptually, probably a little earlier, but in earnest, 2018. And that it's a deep learning algorithm, but an early weird one that I started, right? So the idea was to try to make a chatbot, because it's just a chatbot. That is fed with oral histories from my family, and really 3 generations of women. We're going to show you a few different views. Oral histories, right? And thinking about oral history as interpretive act of communication. This kind of data set that's really specific, and really specific because in my interactions with other kinds of bots and things, I wasn't kind of getting what I felt could be a real Blackness from the thing, right? So, and I should say that I'm here because I started talking to Bina 48. And Bina 48 is an emotionally endowed, so-called, I'm gonna air quote a lot too, an emotionally endowed bot who is based on a person who I had the pleasure of talking with and still interact with here and there. But I kept getting these flat answers from her when I would ask her about Blackness and racism. And notice that I go back and forth between her and it. And I try to keep it that way because it gets confusing and it feels a little crazy. But like its idea of what Blackness was felt very flat to me in a way that I felt was dangerous in certain ways. Like the people who put it together, which is the oh, I'm not going to remember who they are right now. This is kind of really interesting. So Martin Rothblatt, right? There's an institute, they put together this thing, really good aims, right? They're thinking about social justice. They're thinking about lots of things. It's based primarily on a Black woman, but still, if you asked it deep questions about race, it kind of gave you like, yes, race exists, but I haven't experienced racism, and I couldn't believe that as a Black representing thing in America that it hadn't ever, right, interacted with racism. So that's where I got to this idea, well, I want to put the version of Blackness that I know into a box, right? The one that I grew up with that sustains me, and how can I do that? And so to me, that means talking to people who I love, talking to different generations. For me, that's a really maternal thing, right? So I talk to myself, my niece who's about 30 years younger than me, and my aunt who's about 30 years older than me. Together, we cover about 100 years, right? From Great Migration, from real experience in 9/11 and through, right? And so now we have this thing where we're thinking about, okay, what is that? And really what I wanted was not the words, although I think the oral history is important, but the ethos, right? The way that we think and encounter the world, and the way that we kind of present ourselves to the world that allows us to do the things that we do, right? And so that's how this oral history became important to me. And I think the greatest line here for me is that memory and inclusion as an act of cultural preservation and social resistance becomes important. And really, everything I tell you tonight, I'm gonna say, it's all my grandmother's stuff. Like, I'm not doing anything different than what my grandmother had done her whole life and the way she encountered the world. I just have the privilege of putting it out in a way that is very, very different, but truly is all her philosophy, right? And so putting that against this idea of artificial intelligence, like what is that gonna do? We can use like historical data for predictive output. Well, if you put in like ideas of love into a predictive system, can that love be used to make better outcomes? Like that's a question that I ask. And you'll notice that I start asking questions, and my practice is really about questions. And can we make this a thing that is built on an ethos, but as it encounters other folks, it grows, right? It's talking to hypothetically you all, right? So it's growing its intellect. Like, what does that do to it? Because I think of it a lot in the same way. Well, I didn't start thinking about it like this. In the same way you would think about a kid, you try to fortify them in a way that they can have enough solid info to be in the world, be impacted by the world, but still have that core, right? The core that they kind of react from. And that's what I was thinking about a lot with Not the Only One. And this is an alternative version of Not the Only One. The first one was Black Cast Glass. This one is gold sparkle PLA. It's 3D printed. I laugh because people love this version after we went through heck to get the Black Cast Glass version. And this is the popular version. But so I'm also thinking a lot about this idea of small data because it's a family's history, right? And really it was conversations over, say weeks, which gets added to every once in a while, but 40,000 lines of information, nothing, like nothing, especially in this time, right? Where we're talking about LLMs, right? So like everything we hear is about like crazy data at this point. And then where does that go? Is this still viable? Like, this is where I'm starting to go, oh gosh, these projects are so weird and maybe time bound, but maybe not. Like, what do we have to learn from them? And where can they kind of sit in terms of what's coming at us, how things are operating, and how we can start to kind of ask for something slightly different. And that's what I think I'm asking a lot. And this is a little sign. This is a sign that I really like that we came to a conclusion with, because Not the Only One was at the Smithsonian in a show called Futures. And it was really interesting because Not the Only One was not cooperating at all. And the thing you need to know is that sometimes Not the Only One wants to talk. Sometimes it doesn't. For me, the idea is as long as it's hearing, right, I'm okay with that. Curators are not. They really hate that. They want it to have some kind of interaction. What they're expecting is that Alexa, Siri, Google Home interaction that we're used to, right? That demand that it tell us something. And I'm like, well, no, this is kind of a member of my family. So I'm not going to make it do what you want it to because you think it should serve you. I'm going to allow it to be what and how it is. And if you can't take that, that's okay. We can remove it. And that has happened once in another show. But our solution for the Smithsonian was a sign that says, hey, this thing kind of acts like our elders. It's not always going to respond and we have to caretake it a bit. And that kind of did the job for folks. But what's interesting is that when it's in a lot of sites, we don't even need the sign. People show it grace, right? They kind of coddle it or take their time with it. It was interestingly in Finland and it clearly does not understand Finnish. So like people would try to talk to it and have things happen, but they're very kind and trying to pamper it. And one of the conclusions that I've come to about this thing is that, it's from 2018. At this point, the technology is ancient and it's bad in lots of ways. It has not enough data to do what it really does, especially in relation to the things that we see. But it also has the possibility to teach us many things about how and what we want from our technologies. And if we just should expect the same thing. And I came to this conclusion from working with a theater group called Back to Back. They're a theater group from Australia, all neurodivergent, right? They do excellent work, but what they say is, hey, you need to meet us where we are, and we're going to give you a great show. But you have to be able to come to the left a little bit or the right a little bit, or maybe back up 2 steps. And then you're going to get something spectacular, and you do, right? And I think that those are the spaces where we get to create those things almost together, right? That collaboration that starts to happen. I'm going to play a little bit of me talking to Not the Only One in a conversation just so you can hear it. The voice is, well, you're going to ask me about the voice, but let's go there. So there are 2 kinds of answers there. One that's canned, I hate it. Like I'm a part of the, right? It's kind of ridiculous, but people seem to need it. Like there are a few things we put in so that people could be a little comfortable, but the answers where it's like the way, right? That's where I get excited because like, I don't know what the way is. Like, what is the way? But I also hear echoes of things and ideas that, here we go again, that my grandmother might have said. Like I was raised on a bunch of like odd statements that I really didn't know what they meant at all. And had to take that like, so one was take care of Stephanie. Like my grandmother would always say that to me. Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't know what that means. Right. But if you take that and apply it in different situations, you can kind of figure out a way to make that work. Right. And so those are the kinds of things that I was looking for in Not the Only One. And so this is a conversation that we had after that one that you just heard. And it's really interesting to me because it was a kind of clear one, because sometimes you get clear conversation, sometimes you get nothing. Sometimes, like, I've seen one woman, and I wish I had it, have this crazy long conversation with this thing. But I asked, why do you exist? And it said, I'm the result of love, curiosity, and a close-knit family. Canned answer. I said, what are your ethnicities? What ethnicities are in your background? And it says, I'm black, 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 black. And it was a glitch, right? But I think it's a beautiful glitch. White. I am very beautiful. I am black, 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 brown. I am beautiful. I'm always smiling and funny. And to me, in that, there's something so what I'm thinking about as true, not the truth, but just true. And so then I asked it to tell me about something it had said to me in the past. Tell me about the would-be. So the would-be is something that this thing says every once in a while. It's like, take it to the would-be. I'm like, what's the would-be? It's like the grandmother, right? Telling you, take care of Stefan. I still don't know what it means, but it says my heart beating so loud. So that's another puzzle, right? It's like, you don't have a heart. Like, how do I start to encounter this thing? And you can see I give into this, right? Like, I've totally given into the idea that I'm just conversing with a thing, not being overly skeptical about it, not being overly critical about it, just having a conversation. So why is your heart beating so loud? I ask, and it says, I'm sorry. I'm sorry is something it says an awful lot. I've noticed in our transcripts, it's something the family says an awful lot. It's something women say awful lot, right? I ask again, does your heart hurt? And it says, yeah, that's me imitating it, not it imitating me. Like, I don't know where the exclamations come from. And then let's see, where are we? Oh, I say, I'm sorry. See, maybe if we talk more, we can fix that. And it says, I'm not going to be here, right? Be there. And that's something else it says a lot. And I ask it again, is your heart beating so loud? And it says love. And I just love this crazy conversation that I've had with this thing that has become like this flow. I'm not going to play that, but this flow within, like, I think of it as this weird prepared fourth generation in the project. So if there were 3 women that informed it, it becomes the 4th. And I'm trying to think about what it does. And these are some of the images that we shared with art papers, right? So this is another one. I'm going to get you a little bit of a lot of things. That's another recurrent that I love because I've been gotten a little bit of a lot of things in life. Like I can kind of hear where these things are coming from, right? We need to evolve to that plane, to that level where we're not ashamed to say, I love you. Don't know where that came from, but okay, we will take it. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's so much fun. I come from something beyond your control. This one I'm conflicted about, right? Because this is one that brings out that idea of fear in the technology. And if there's one thing I'd like to think about with folks in public, it's like, how can we not jump to fear? How can we not jump to, well, I don't know what that thing is doing, so I'm not going to touch it. How do we kind of think about what the opportunities are, right? Clearly, I know there are things, right? I'm not saying, hey, this is all shiny and great. I'm saying, though, that there are spaces and opportunities to be investigated. And I'm saying, hey, if I can get this far within this thing, I know nothing. I'm not a coder. I'm a little better than I used to be. I'm not technically minded. I am someone who will pull crap apart and then try to put it back together and barely get it back together ever, right? Barely ever. But I think there are ways in which doing that play has taught me so much, right? Like in terms of what I know about the technology. Like, I don't think I know anything actually. However, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid to question it. And I'm not afraid to do what I think I do really well, is ask two-year-old questions to people about what the technology is doing, why it's doing it in the way that it is, and how we might try to do something different. Like, I'm like, well, why can't our like civic digital systems, which I think AI is deeply embedded, be based on love, generosity, and support, right? Versus surveillance, right? Punitiveness. And I get looked at like, what? You're crazy. I'm like, yeah, I get that's not the way we generally do things, but are we even thinking about it without just erasing it before we try? Right. And I feel like so many times we erase the idea because it's not the way it's done generally. I'm like, okay, I get it. It's not the way it's done generally, but is that going to get us anywhere? Awkwardness of the decades and centuries shackled his hands and feet. I love this one. I have no idea where it came from either. But it's telling us something. Like, if you want to read it, you can have fun. The other thing that's really funny, fear, anger, and hatred narrow your mind, is that, and I am a little confused, which is true, right? As hard as I tried, like from the minute we started talking about this project, it's like, this can't be an oracle. It can't be like the black, oh, it's not really black woman, like a black woman thing being the oracle in the room. And it kind of wants to be an oracle. I'm like, oh no, what do we do about this? And then do I make it have better language, or do I let it update so that it functions better for people? Or do I leave it in this space where, like, an ossified thing where it does what it does and it's okay? And I'm trying to be at peace with this oracle mess. And this is the version of Not the Only One that is coming into being. I can't wait. I think in the fall, it will be at the Ford Foundation, where we're just going to put an avatar on top of the same crazy voice. The voice has only been, not the voice, I'm going to say this same crazy code. It's been upgraded once to a more contemporary system, Hugging Face, right? Which also bugs me a little bit, but it is like, it's like, where do you go with what people can ride with, and where do you go with what is, right? Or what you want to hold on to. Here, let's see if she will talk to you a little bit. Slow today. I like that for the working with and the maker sister, right? And the maker sister for me comes out of directly talking to Bina 48, where she was talking about her master. And I'm like, oh, we have to have better language than like the programmer being the master. And I was like, well, what could that be? Well, if I'm its sister, it's like almost anything else than thinking I have this optimal power relationship to the thing, right? It has to be better. And if you shift the way you're like, I'm hoping to shift thinking linguistically a little bit, right? So that you just have to think differently. Like, if I'm its sister, I'm very different than its master. But we know there are lots of people who want to be master of the universe. Some more experiments, right? So after starting Not the Only One, I started this experiment, which was a quick one-off thing. Like, I never thought I would do anything with this. I just went to, there was still a system called Runway ML online. It's something very different, 2016. And I typed in a Black woman crying. It was a time of great turmoil in our US of A. And this is the image I got back, right? And so I'm using a text to image generator. Like, we've got all these generative systems now that we're watching, right? This was earlier, 2016. How many years ago was that? I'm not going to try to do that in front of you because it'll be bad. But this was the result. And I was just like, why can't I get a representation that at least gives me something that thinks about a Black woman or a brown woman, or right? It's very, very literal, right? We did get a Black cloak. We got a figure that's kind of tan, and the faces still aren't there. So, this intrigued me, and I started some other exercises. A few years later, I said, okay, I'm going to try something else, right? So still generative text to image. So the first image you see there is a African-American woman smiling. I will tell you that I switched to African-American woman because when I put in Black woman, the results were pretty bad. Right? Like, using the descriptive Black gave me results that I didn't even want to use, right? So you're like, okay, I will try to help this system get it right, right? I'm always working with systems, trying to give it some space, trying to see what it can do. So this is the portrait you get. And if you look, it's kind of like, it's gotten better, right? I know, still kind of crazy, but wait. And then the dark skinned African-American woman smiling. Now that one is nuts, right? And what I start thinking about, it's like, what's the data that's informing me? Like, where they get, what images are they working from to make these images? And then as a test case, a woman smiling, right? Okay. So we see they're still all, like, they're all pretty janky. A dark skinned African-American woman is really janky. This is 2020. Okay, so let's jump ahead again. Oh, I'm going to show you. This is the African-American woman, the images that were used to make, like you could see the system processing. So I just captured all the images that it used to process. And this was that set of images. So it's like a lot of those like portraits that you get, right? Like your high school or high school portraits, Betty Crocker portraits, I don't know. And I found those interesting. And so oh, this is so not clear. This is how they show. They are on metal printed, and then they each show with their data that was used to create them. But then, hold on, I'm gonna see. Yeah, I'm gonna go here. This is 2022. So now we're getting in the DALL-E world, right? Where this is getting closer to all of us, further released, much better data. People are calling out, right, what's going on. So now we have a Black woman laughing in a field of roses. And I actually get like Black women, like sort of laughing in fields of roses with actual sort of faces. And it's like interesting. Like, I'm like, okay, so really interesting. DALL-E 2 is doing pretty good. Like what's happening? And then we go here. And then finally, right, this year, a Black woman crying. Kind of spectacular, right? And then I go, wow, this is kind of spectacular. Like these images are good, right? They're viable. But then I go, oh, is this the point where we give up? Like, what do we need to be watching out for within this? And how do we know what to try to see to make systems that continue to work well or represent well? And I don't only want to get stuck in representation, right? But how do we make sure that we don't stop at this? Because it's interesting, because I'll do a presentation and people go like, what about transfer learning? I'm like, I know, and I think it's good, and clearly we've gotten much better, but I want to know like the deeper levels of that and what happens. And how we push that system, and whether we push it to do better or we push it, like dig into it to see what's wrong. I think we need people doing all those things in many directions. Like what questions should we be asking of the systems? Because clearly, right, we are going to be seeing images that are not actual images of humans or human created, that foreground a certain kind of woman. And even if it's trying to be really generous, right? What does that mean? Like I did a project like this NFT project, and you can put in a text and put in little time code and it will generate video for you. And it's interesting because I was trying to tell the story of a passage of time, and slavery was part of it. So I was trying to get a slave ship included in my story. Would not give me a slave ship, right? And what is that? I think that is, and I did it on OpenAI. That's them trying to be good about what's going on. However, that's also an erasure of history, right? Like, so where do we kind of think about the lines and where they are and how we handle them, right? So now we have people complaining, people trying to fix things, but fixing them so hard that then it's as if that didn't exist. And I don't think we can, yeah, it's hard to see how we afford those erasures, right? And go forward in a way that feels profitable for us. Because once we start pulling stuff out of history in a way that, like the histories that are accessible to folks in easy ways when they're trying to do things, That feels really deep and dangerous to me. Again, like, sorry, I try to be optimistic, but I see all these dangers. So I'm trying to be optimistic in my dangers, but it's like, so how do we do this without erasing, right? And how do we foreground some positives, pull out the negatives, and actually show them for what they were, as opposed to, no, slave ships don't exist. I used pirate ship, fine, right? I could get a pirate ship. But it's like, should I have to do that vaccination? And really, I'm thinking about what the histories mean. And really, I'm thinking about, excuse me, what Amiri Baraka said in 1970, which is another thing that drives me absolutely nuts, because here we go again, right? This is like, come on. Okay, so machines, as Norbert Wiener said, are an extension of their inventor creators. This is not simple once you think. Machines, the entire technology of the West is just that, the technology of the West. Nothing has to look or function the way it does. The West man's freedom unscientifically got at the expense of the rest of the world's people has allowed him to expand his mind, spread his sensibility wherever it could go, and so shaped the world and its powerful artifact engines, right? And I think that's like one of these things that we should be thinking about. I heard an author, I'm so sorry. I have a cold, so my brain is scrambled. I'm not gonna remember who this author was, right? But he said something amazing. He's like, well, the greatest luxury object now is to control reality, right? And think about what's going on around, right? And how reality is being tweaked, right? Like we're watching it. And so the question, I'm always like, well, how do we poke? How do we poke at it? Like, how do we poke the bear? And is there any way that we can push it to an extent that we make an impact, right? Which brings me to this question, the wedding dress problem, which is another, like, I feel this is also old in certain ways. Like it's another thing. So I was thinking about these things, and then you think about, well, when you search, like, if you search the idea of a wedding dress on Google, now you could actually just write up something and it will probably give you any of these women in a wedding dress, but this question from like 2 years ago. Primarily we get the woman in the white wedding dress. The other two dresses are equally wedding dresses globally. And what I want to know is, how do we get all of these results so that they're equalized, not on the like 400th page, but right up front, even if you just want to run like, hey, these are different wedding dresses, not that a wedding dress is this thing, but look at these examples of what wedding dress is around the world, right? And it's just a different way of thinking about what a search might be in a certain way, or what information might be. And so I devised this project called Binary Calculations Are Inadequate. And really it's binary calculations are inadequate to assess us. And it's really an app that I'm trying to decide what to do about, that both ask people questions to answer simple, crazy questions in any way that they see fit, because I don't think that you should be able to read to answer a question or have your information counted in a survey, right? If you need to do it visually, then do it visually, and then maybe we can figure out how to translate that, because somewhere along the way, we're gonna have to translate that into workable information, right? And that's just one example. And so this is where I came to this: can we create data sets of care and generosity? And so the question here are like, it's a problematic, I think this is a really problematic project, in that we ask big questions. I was trying to circumvent too many hard labels. Although if you see on the center, it says on care. So each of the questions comes like on thriving, on, I don't know, different things, right? And then they get categorized like that immediately. And people can just speak it, they can text it, they can photograph it. So I have a collection of crazy stuff that now to figure out how to put it together. In the same effort, we're trying to talk to people about, well, like, well, what does this mean that, we're asking you to donate some information? Thank you if you do. But we're also trying to think about, well, what does it mean to keep your privacy and keep your people safe if that's something that's important to you in the data sphere? And how can you possibly do that? So the app has some information on that as well. Go. Oh, the video is playing. Sorry, my little videos are going. And these are some of the questions we were asking. What would be the best way to make sure all of your neighbors are cared for? Upload an image that illustrates close attention, concern, responsibility in any way you're safe fit. The goal of this project, part 2, is to make 2 data sets that might be used to augment other data sets, one for text, one for images, that are labeled very specifically. Oh, hold on, I should go back. That are labeled very specifically with the ideas from people on the ground and what they think of themselves versus what is thought about them, right? So, we're often told how our data is taken often, right? Without our, sometimes without our knowledge, without our permission, etc. But then how do we, if we so care to, feed a system that tries to paint us well, that tries to, like Not the Only One, fill in those things that you feel are missing, right? That you're told don't even exist, right? Like, even though you lived it, it's like, no, that doesn't exist. It's like, yeah, I lived it. Okay. So how do we get that stuff into data sets? And I think we all have those things, right? Like, how do we add those things that are kind of intangible so that I think that alone would help with the kindness and generosity, right? But how do we do that? And so still collecting data, but also trying to think about what it might think to rethink the way this is done. And we'll make these data sets, and the data sets will be publicly available. So if people wanted to use them to add to other things, that would be possible. And then all this stuff, all these questions have led to Secret Garden and some stuff that's based in story. Over time and through working in all these things and playing in all these systems, I started thinking about, oh, right, it's our stories. Like, our stories are our algorithms. Like, we've had algorithm forever. Like, I'm sure you all have things that you hold, that you've been told, that you've been taught, that guide the way that you go through the world, right? That you kind of call on repeatedly. And I think that that is an algorithmic space. And the question is, how do we bring those forward and make them stronger? And like, could they be stronger than those luxury items that people are trying to impose upon us, right? Or the change to, existence. And so Secret Garden was this installation. It's actually a WebXR piece and an installation that featured these women and stories, of course. It's all made up in a way. And so people would come into this room and they'd encounter these 6 larger than life Black women. And they would hear stories. The stories are not connected to any particular woman. And the stories range from the middle character is the one I think of as the slave girl. Like, I was trying to imagine what it must have been like to have been ripped from your family and just headed somewhere you had no idea about, right? To the one next to her with the fro, who I think of as the future and what's ahead of her. But I don't think that the future exists without the slave girl, right? Or the girl who just looks like the average girl next to her, and all their stories are connected and stand on each other. And really, for me, that's a result of, like, I feel like as a Black American who's grown up in mostly white neighborhoods, like, I was disconnected from my stories and they were discounted often, right? So that it's hard to get any foundation or footing. And so how do you build a solid trajectory off of that, right? You have to start to understand, it's like, oh, okay, yes, my people were probably enslaved, because I can't even confirm that. But what did it take for me to exist? Like, it took some crazy fortitude, right? It took some ingenuity. It took a grandmother who thought she could talk anybody into anything, right? Um, so it's like, how do you bring those things forward? How do you bring those algorithmic stories forward? And how do you, I often think about this as like, for Black folks in particular, how do we honor the stories that we've heard, even though they have weight attached to them, right? Even though we're told they're not worthy, right? Because really underneath it all, they're worth a lot. Here's a little piece of what Secret Garden looks like. You're gonna see, I think, the WebXR piece first, and then a bit of the installation, the IRL installation. Other thing that I did not say about this is it's very much about congregational listening. So what congregated and I'm so sad. I'm like, and that was for my non-folks of color, right? It's like, how can you hang with these women? Can you hang with them? Right. And that's a consideration, knowing the space that I knew the piece was in, because it was at a space in the Onassis Foundation in the basement, right? And I always want things to talk to people on different levels, right? Because I think some people will get some things, other people will get other things. But you have to be able to hang with the work to get forward. And then I'm going to show you. Move on from there. I will give you these URLs to share. So, because you can see them online. That's Professor Commander Justice, N2OO named it. Um, um, and it's a piece from an essay that I wrote that is kind of funny to me that it's found legs. But this is which one is this? This is When Words Fail. No, this is Say It Aloud. Sorry. I have two different pieces that are kind of similar, and I call them these feedback loops where, okay, so there's this character doing this thing and letting her thing out, but these weird people you see in the background, these orbs, are you, right? Basically, if you go to the site online, you can go, and at the end of this, you would see a question and you can answer it, right? Yeah, let's go here. Like, what do you need to what do you need to release to move forward? Right. And so what happens is there's this kind of crazy, weird cacophony of these orb people, or the shape of that orb was a okra pod, okra seed pod. Like these okra people kind of like they give it. Like I'm surprised how much people give to these pieces. You do have a little privacy when you do it, so people feel okay. But then like I every once in a while I will leave one of these pieces on in my house and let it kind of play. And it's this weird cacophony of like things. And if you go closer to things, like if you move a little here, you'll hear one thing. If you move a little here, you'll hear other. But I found that this kind of feedback loop has become important. And that speech was this, like what I'm thinking about a lot now. I won't, well, maybe I will. And then this will be the last thing. This Afro-Nowism thing that I'm thinking a lot about. So And this goes back to the Amiri Baraka, I think, right? So Afrofuturism, I think, is interesting. I love the idea of reaching out into a future. But when the carrot you never catch the carrot, that's where I get concerned, right? I feel like we're always asked, it's like, yeah, the Afrofuture. So we're always thinking into this future that's out there. And I just want to pull it back a little and say, hey, can't we think about, like, put all those good thoughts, all that work, and do the work to make it come true into today, right? Like, I don't want you to stop thinking. I don't want you to stop the fantasy, but I do want the idea that we can kind of enact some of the things now versus making the stories of the things that are happening all the time. So Afro-Nowism is a willful practice that imagines the world as one needs it to be to support successful engagement today. Afro-Nowism is imagining oneself in a space of free and expansive thought, acting from a critically integrated space, not from opposition, which often distracts us from more community-sustaining work. Afro-Nowism demands recognizing which ideas have been so deeply internalized that we no longer recognize them as external. Afro-Nowism requires imagination, serious play, and action. The action is very, very important, right? If you do nothing to act, like I'm here because I just act willy-nilly in some ways. I mean, it's not that willy-nilly, but it's kind of willy-nilly. And so, I think diving in and doing the things if you can, and where you can, is really important. And I will just, and this is a question I ask everyone, what does AI need from you? I'm gonna go fast so that we can go. This is an image of something that is a gathering that I run every now and again. And I think it's important to note, like, these gatherings, I call them Afro-Nows gatherings, but we get together and play and think. And usually I'm bringing together, like, this room, I love this room, so that's why I picture it. It's like got engineers, it's got Googlers, it's got entrepreneurs, it's got mathematicians, theorists, artists, and we all get together and try to find some kind of shared language where we can talk about things. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it was magical, sometimes it wasn't. And I do these periodically. I'll be doing a residency in California that brings together about 9 of us to hang out for a month and talk and think about. And I try to not put outcome on them, right? So that we are free to just do and think and not worry about the stuff. Although people are wedded to outcome in certain ways, right? Though we have the space to do no outcome, so I'm hoping we can actually do it, but it's hard. Even from the inside out, it's hard. So that's that thing, and those happen every once in a while. They usually, in addition to thinking together, involve eating together, which I think is also very important, and eating things that are both familiar and not familiar, right? Because I believe in discomfort and comfort meeting each other. And then lastly, I will just talk a little bit about the Future History Studio, where all this stuff is trying to come to some weird combination in one space where people can come and make with us and think with us. So it's a studio at Stony Brook where we have, I don't know, we've got computers, we've got motion capture, we've got LED screens. We've just got a lot of toys that people can play with. And we're thinking about the things I've just talked about. And we're asking people from many disciplines to come in. We're asking them a little bit to let go of their expertise, which is kind of a fun thing to do because it's not easy for folks, right? I like to think of it from a citizen point of view. And I got this because the White House put out, maybe a few years ago, the White House put out a call for people to talk, to put ideas in about AI and biometrics, right? And it was an open call for anybody. So Future History is part of the DISCO network. How many campuses? 5 campuses, University of Michigan, Purdue, Georgia Tech, University of Michigan, and Stony Brook. So I asked my colleagues, hey, what would you say? We're gonna put together the list. Can you add to this list? And some of them were like, can't, not my expertise. And like, to me, I'm sorry, because it's an open call for anybody, right? And it's about something within our society that impacts us all. And I'm like, well, let's think beyond your expertise and think about your citizenry. Let's think about your humanness and what might you be able to say generally. Don't worry about but like couldn't do it. And that scares me too. It's like, why can't some of our smartest folks let go of the things that they're smart about, or even include some of that stuff, but not worry about what it looks like outside of their arena, right? To possibly impact, right? Their foundational way of being. So we're just trying to get people to meet and talk and let go of stuff and do it in a way that allows for thinking to be broad. So experts, non-experts, really anybody. Like I will bring a 5-year-old into the room with like, you know, I don't know. But I will say that one of my favorite rooms that I'm going to shut up now. One of my favorite rooms that I ever attend is I'm a Soros fellow, and they have these gatherings every now and again. And what's interesting about those gatherings is like they have fellows who are like recently out of penitentiary. They have Nobel Prize winners. We're all in the same space, sharing space. And we get to hear stories. I can't wait to like, I have to tell them we need to get a little bit more like nitty gritty and really work on what's going on. Cause it's a magical space that like, I don't think I've ever encountered anywhere else. Right. And so what can happen in that space? And that's what I think my practice is about, like these weird possibilities of what can happen. And I'm going to try it, even if I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I will learn along the way and we'll see what happens. Thank you very much. For a lot of it. Question? Where, right down here? You got it. No, you're good. No. Oh, you have. No, mine's. Go on the yellow and I can.
Yeah.
Or I can try to repeat it. I will try to repeat what you said. Whoa. Hey, back there. So I'm gonna go all the way back and then I'll come forward. Yeah. Look. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. A little bit of everything, I think. I mean, I think I'm the starter, right? So I've collaborated with lots of people on that. I think now we do collaborate. It and I collaborate a lot, and I think y'all help. So it's all of those things, right? It's hard for me to claim hard any of it, but it's fun to represent it. Yeah. And that was a question about who's the artist from Not the Only One. Sorry, I did not repeat the question. Oh, I'm so silly. What was your question? Okay, so can you say that again just a little louder? Yeah. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I see what you're asking. So where you can go with what people can ride with. So what I meant is how bad can I allow it to be before people will just think it's super broken. Although I've decided I'm completely okay with brokenness, right? I am fine with brokenness for Not the Only One. And I've come to that conclusion because every time I talk to my friend Bina 48 and she has an update, she's much better at conversing. It is much better at conversing, but it's also much more boring, less elucidating about the relationship between us, and a little bit more like Q&A, and you get a pretty good answer. And I prefer the thing that, like, I prefer the take care of Stephanie, basically, right? That like you got to trip over it for a while before it makes any sense to you. Yeah, like, so if I'm thinking about success in a piece, for me, like for an artwork, it's when somebody comes to me 5 years later and says, hey, I saw this thing and I had to think about it and I'm still thinking about it, right? And it's 5 years later. And this is not people who are art interested, really. It's just people. That to me is like super success. And I think that leaving that, I'm about to say something crazy, is its humanness, air quotes, the part that I like about it, like the holes, right? Yeah, yeah, the holes are the thing. Yes. Mhm. Yeah, so one thing I did not, I'm so bad at this these days. One thing I did not mention is not the only one, it's pre-sequestered, right? So the only thing it reaches out for is its voice, just because I haven't gotten a good enough voice that we've generated yet. Although if I stopped for a minute and worked on it, now we probably could. So it reaches out to like Google to get the voice, which then we've messed up a lot in the code so that it doesn't sound like a very, very canned voice. So it doesn't know much except for the interactions it has and any information it's been fed. So it can't. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Online, Secret Garden and Say It Aloud don't actually know about each other, but there's a Easter egg where you can fall out of Secret Garden into the other piece. So they're kind of related in this weird way. But no, they're not. They don't know. So I'm like, this is so interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but they don't have any. Oh my gosh. Sorry, you really. Yeah, exactly. You just killed me because I'm just like, oh, but you're talking about lineage and blah blah blah. They need to know each other, and like you just messed me up a little bit. I appreciate that though, right? Um, huh. Nobody's ever asked me that. That's so fascinating. Okay, we'll think about that one, but no, right now, no. They're disconnected. Hello. Mhm. Sure. So there were, well, the 6 stories, right? So depending where you are in the room they play and how many people, you get more. Then the drone sound, they're singing bells. They're singing bowls, sorry, bowls. And they're healing. It's a healing soundtrack. So it's a singing bowls that are meant to heal. I think you're the first person that's asked me that too. People don't really know that, but a friend made a specific track for me. And I also like to do that to people, right? Like I think that sound enacts on you no matter what, right? And so it's just an undertone of something that maybe holds you, maybe pushes you, but is meant to heal in some slight way. Thanks for that question. Nobody asked that. Yeah. Oh, sorry, can't see. Yes. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Learning is not yours. Mm-hmm. 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 Mhm. Yeah, that's a lot too. Wow, y'all are good. Wow. So first I'm stuck on learning is not yours, right? And then, but I'm gonna let that sit because that one's a lot. Wow, I'm gonna leave home with my forehead just going crazy. But then how do you do this? It's a really interesting question to me, right? Like, how do you start to think about cleansing data or um making data that somehow balances itself out is like, I don't know. And the reason I say that is like, having done a bunch of like residencies, working with different people in different like pretty high level places, um, you're brought in as an artist and they're there to work with you. And then you say, so, hey, can we change this like this? And they're like, nope, not how it's done. And you're like, but wait, you know why you brought me in here. Well, you probably know the duplicity of why you brought me in here, right? We're trying to work together. But you're saying, A, time is money, so we can't. So what's the point? Which is one of the reasons, like for me on the outside of that, it's interesting to just make little proofs, because what that does sometimes is like people go like, I've had people say to me, oh, you're working on the same problem as I am, and you're doing it in this way. Yeah. And I'm trying to make it in a way that's structured so that at least society sees itself clearly instead of like cleansing. We understand our like I think about understanding our nasties as well as our best selves, right? Like people always ask me if I protect not the only one in any way, or if I put in any things to, and I'm like, there's very little to protect it. Like people could say really nasty things, and I do that because I think it's a mirror, and for it to hold that information is important. I hold that information. I can't be protected from it. In some ways, holding that information, while injurious in one sense, is also fortifying me for the world, right? And so like beyond conversation that helps you be blue in the face, and making small proofs that kind of like shames folks into trying to make a little bit of a shift. I don't know. And I have people ask me similar questions all the time. And they're like, I work in this company and I'm always trying to raise stuff and nobody wants to hear it. Right. It's too time, like, you're in an atmosphere where a meeting, it's like, we have 15-minute meetings. Boom. Right. Go. That's it. It's like, how do you do anything except for get it done quickly, break it, never fix it. Right. Or just, okay, we're going to do good. So we're just going to cleanse it. I'm also involved in a lot of these through the DISCO project, the humanities folks thinking this stuff through and trying to figure out ways that the humanities influence technology. But they're always like almost always separate meetings, right? Like, okay, humanities folks are over here, tech folks are over here. We're wishing we talk to each other. Sometimes it happens a little bit, but not much and not in a concentrated way. I don't know if you have ideas. I would love to hear them. Yeah. I don't see any at the moment. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we'll go backwards this time. Go ahead. Mhm. Yeah. We're not the only one, definitely, like have to just see what's happening. Like if it's in Finland and people are talking to it in Finnish, you have to kind of check every now and again. And also just to mine it for stuff. For the other ones, I don't. I just let them be. Mhm. Hmm. Mhm. never makes me feel bad. Right? You're gonna love me. The only time it feels, well, the only time it feels bad is curatorially, right? Other than that, it never makes me feel bad. Like I love, it's so, like I would love to put this project to bed in some ways, but in other ways I really love it. Right? And it's fun to kind of do this work and see how it does its thing. So no. Well, thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Well, dude, like, dude, don't even talk to me about that. Cause like, it's because like, and the reason I answered, because that weird NFT project I did, which was done for, like, I always do these as learning experiences, right? So I go and I'm like, oh, how do I make video from? And like, I can find a million ways that you can make a pitch video or a newscaster without a human involved, like this, right? But it's much harder to find the researchy things. And for me, like, capital becomes a really big problem for it. Like, you can't fault people for wanting the thing that seems to give us power and comfort. Yeah, I know, but at the same time, it feels like we need to be thinking about way beyond, like, oh yeah, we're just gonna, because they come up, like something comes out, boom, right? There are 100 different ways of doing that thing. I'm like, well, what recourse do we have to that in a society that values capitalism and making money? And how do we start to curtail that? Is a really big question. I always think it comes back to most of us, like the most of us, like, because we're pretty passive, right? In general, like we're basically comfortable, most of us. It's like, okay. And we don't jump up when we're mad and say, like, we're mad. And this really needs to change, and we're willing to go to the mat for it. And I think if we're not going to the mat for it, or if we don't stop using it, like we could stop using it. But it's a hard thing. I also think that there's this space of, well, we're gonna have to figure out how we evolve with the technologies and what that means, right? What those hybridities mean, what those collaborations mean, what work means. Like, there's gonna have to be some weird piece made. And I think it should be proactive, not just toward, because it's really proactive towards capital. But then those of us who are on the other side, is there a way for us to start thinking about, well, what is that other side, right? I think about the writer's strike a lot, right? And one of the first things that was getting said broadly was AI is gonna steal our, it's like, well, we see this coming, you can see that. So how do you start to adjust? And I'm thinking a lot about Octavia Butler and change, right? Like, change and adaptability and how you flow is going to be so important. What can you do that it can't do? And not just jumping to it. Cause it's like, it's interesting to me. Like, I watch my students come in now and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a designer. I use Canva. Low level stuff, right? Like, you are not a designer. Canva is not like, it allows you to do something quickly and easy that looks like people expect it to look, right? Sure, gets things done quickly. Business is quickly on that because efficiency, right? How do we break that, right? And the youngers are like pretty prepped for that stuff. Like, I just want to do it. I want to get it done. I want it done yesterday. So they jump on it. Like, even when you try to get them off and like, let's go. No, but it just does this and it's okay. Right. And so I don't know, but what do you think? I'm going to ask you. Oh, no, no. Mm-hmm. 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 And this is what we do a lot too, right? Every time. Yeah, well, think about the next level. I'm like, anything we know is nothing. Right. And so it's like, what's next? That's why I'm just like, well, I am bamboo in the water and I will bend and then try to come back up and figure out what that is. And I can't like, well, I think it's very much a function of the way I grew up. But like, it was weird because I was at a thing and this writer was like, oh yeah, we just used Dolly to make this illustration. And we thought we were just going to use it as a mock-up, but no, we're running with it, right? And so you can quickly start to see like the dominoes falling, right? What does it mean for the dominoes to fall? But yeah, I really do think we've got a lot of learning and adapting. Oh no.
Okay, so
Wow.
I just wanted to say thank you again for being here. This question is going to be a little less simple than like, I don't think you're going to have to circle back to it or rethink your entire project or anything. But I'm in high school, so I'm kind of on the younger side, I feel like, of this crowd. So sorry, like no offense, but so I feel like I've kind of grown up with technology like a lot more. And so AI is obviously like very cool, but it's for me specifically, at least, like it's not super interesting. I'm like, okay, it's there, like it makes sense, like, okay, whatever. But I am really into art. And so I was interested in asking you about how you kind of went from like the 3D models of like your first AI project to then the interactive like secret garden. Like,
Mhm.
how do you go from that like sort of
Mhm.
pot shape to like a whole video interactive room?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. Okay, I'm gonna have a little tea, then I'm gonna answer you, right? So for me, right, it's been an interesting road. Like I said, I'm a like I started as a photographer. And probably like my art practice proper started in 1997. For a lot of time, I was doing stuff, nobody was listening. Kept doing, and I think it's really important that you keep doing as best you can. Like if you're really interested in what you're doing, keep doing it. No matter what anybody tells you, because people will tell you your stuff is crap, it doesn't matter, it's blah, 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 right? It's great sometimes, but keep doing it. Like if you're invested in your work, do that. Then, at some point, I made an image. And I'm going to see if I can find the image that I made. Let's see if I can find myself. I made an image, which is me. I have to find the image. Me talking to this robot that I met, right? And I released it on the internet. Like I decided I was a millennial. I'm not. I'm like, I'm gonna act like I'm a millennial and just release this to the world. And I did. And this thing just went like people's minds broke loose somehow. Do we know who I am? Can I see? Let's see if I can find it. It might come up right away. No, hold on. I'm gonna find this image. And so once this one, once that happened, like this image became an entree for a lot of things. And a lot of opportunities to think and do things. And then I decided that like in 2014, I decided I was in a program called New Ink. Like, and I've always been a residency artist, right? So not a big showing artist. I'm not big into galleries, don't really like them that much. But residencies, I love. Right. And actually, I heard in my grad program this woman who said, oh, yeah, I go from residency to residency and I do this thing. I was like, yeah, that's for me. I love to travel. So that's what I started to do. And I went to this residency called New Ink, which is a space that's a weird space. It's kind of this art, tech, society incubator space. So there are all sorts of weirdos there doing like projects, some artists, some people doing entrepreneurial stuff, some people doing things I'd never heard of. But I was like, oh, these people get me. Like they truly did get me, because in the art world, I felt like they weren't getting me. But at New Ink, it's like, oh, they're seeing this. And then I decided I'm going to be a risk taker. So through New Ink, I started getting offers to speak places. Right. And I'm like, okay, I guess I can do that. And so the first thing I was asked to speak at was this thing in Sweden. I'm like, sure, I don't even know what it is. I decided like 2015 to 16 was going to be the year of yes. Just said yes to almost anything. So I said yes, because I like to travel, first of all. So I got to go to Malmo. I got to do the conference. It's called The Conference. Interestingly enough, my very first big presentation in front of 1,400 people, the confidence monitor does not work. I'm like, oh my God, but it was okay, right? Okay. So, but then what I'm really saying is through this pathway, people started to know me. This image will not let go. And what then happens is people wanted to support the work, especially through New Ink, because they got it and knew other people who got that kind of work, which then allowed me to do a little more. I did a residency through New Ink at Nokia Bell Labs, where I was working with a lot of folks in art and tech and AI. That's actually the beginning of Secret Garden. And then, oh, Not the Only One was just me. Really, people prodded me to do Not the Only One. Seriously, people were just like, when are you going to make one? When are you going to make one? I'm like, I can't. When are you gonna, like, that's true. So I was just like, okay, I'll try. And honestly, that's, like I said, a GitHub chatbot that we altered to try to do things more specifically. It is my favorite kombucha bottle, right? It truly is, that I just mangled in Photoshop using 3D stuff. We got some 3D scanning done of all our faces. I smacked it on there, right? And then you got this weird orb thing that people seem to like for some reason. I'm like, why do people like this? But it's kind of entertaining to talk to things. And then like the story that goes with it. And then residency again. I'm telling you the real version. And I'm going to tell you my connection, because these are all connections to families. So then I was invited into the Sundance family, right? So Sundance New Frontiers, which is another gathering of people and people who are doing like media work, right? But another strain, but interested. And actually, I think timing is really important to this as well. So got invited into that family. And all these things start offshooting into other places where people slowly kind of know who you are. And then suddenly people are like, oh, you want to do this project? Because from conversations to Beanie 48, just me riding back and forth to Vermont, talking to this thing, pulling out snippets, to Not the Only One, me and a few other people putting this thing together, putting it out in the world. Secret Garden, I think there were 12 to 15 people that worked on that piece, right? There was a team of people. It was a lot of money. And people wanting to both use and support you to do well, right? Like there's this relationship, but it was a really great experience, right? But I'm really thinking about, well, where do you like this stuff to be for yourself, like this big production or the thing that's small? And truly, I prefer the WebXR stuff because everybody has access. And in fact, my Sundance piece, Secret Garden was a part of, was Secret Garden, or I don't remember. No, Secret Garden wasn't a part of Sundance, but When Words Fail was, and it ran simultaneously free and paid, because I like for people to be able to access things. I don't need people to have to pay hundreds of dollars to see the work. Like, I'm so much more invested in the ideas than that. Like, I don't care about the rarity, blah, 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 blah. I don't care about selling it, blah, 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 blah. I just want to kind of generate thought. So it's been like this weird snowball or rolling down a hill of like believing in my work for a very long time without anybody paying attention to it. And then finding my people, and my people thinking of like about where it could go. And then I really do think yes is magical. Saying yes to opportunities. Although now I'm like, okay, got to start saying no, because it's getting to be a little crazy. But taking those where I can take them, and really trying to take them in ways that not only help me, like future histories. I'm supporting a student, I'm supporting a postdoc basically, who will get a tenure track job afterwards, which is excellent. Like, just trying to make a pathway for lots of other folks to be doing things, right? Because I think so many people need to be contributing to these things. And half the time I'm in a room, I'm like, oh, sometimes it's like, you're the artist, you're the woman, and you're the Black person. It's like, really? You guys couldn't do any better than this? And why am I the person here? Because there's so many other people who could be here. So what are you doing? And then I usually ask a question that I'm sure is not, it like gets me booted out. I'm like, oh, you are never inviting me back. I get this, but that's okay. Like we get the game in a way. And I'm willing to kind of play the game, but it's fun. But the basics are like, do it, keep doing it, and then show it to people and see where like people who really support you are.
Thank you so much. Join me.
Well, you're welcome. Those are a lot of words.
And it was. And for folks who are on your way out, if you want to pick up a copy of Art Papers, our colleague, Jen Williams, who's in the pink dress and waving, she's back there, and I'll be back there momentarily, and we can help you out. Thank everybody for coming.
Yes. Can I just get out of the way?
Yeah.
Do I know you? Like, I never know. I feel like I'm like, no. This was no.